people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with the main event of the Matchroom show in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where Paro attempted to defend the red belt, the IBF title, against his mandatory challenger Hitchins, the newly crowned IBF champion. What we saw at the start.
Well,
Liam got off to a good start.
but it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
This was a good example. In the opening stanza, you see that Liam is off to a fast start, and he's putting a lot of pressure on Hitchins, staying with him and being busy with his lead. In effect, disarming Hitchins. Disarming Hitchins' lead hand with his own by being so busy with it. And because Liam is a southpaw, moving to his right, that kept him on the outside of Hitchins' left, allowing him to come over the top consistently with jabs. That was working for about 4 or 5 rounds.
Double jabs, triple jabs, straight left hands down the pipe. It was working in the opening stanza, but as the fight progressed and we approached the mid-rounds, Liam starts to slow down. The approach becomes repetitive.
Hitchins is finding his range more, landing cleanly with jabs that are snapping Liam Paro's head back. The occasional right hand, ever so occasional.
Things were starting to slow down. You saw the tide shift, and Liam, he couldn't adjust. He kept doing the same thing.
It was getting harder and harder for him to get close enough to Hitchins to land a punch without eating a jab on the way in. Hitchins assumed control, and from the middle towards the end, it was a Hitchins fight. He was in control. Nothing dramatic about it, because when a pure boxer is fighting his fight, every round looks the same. They start to. Whether it's a Sky Nicholson fight, or a Shakur Stevenson fight, in this instance, a Hitchins fight, every round starts to look the same.
They're not going to take big chances. It's only going to be 1 and 2 punches at a time. They're going to land cleanly and do just enough to win the round.
Just enough. The earmark of the pure boxer really is defense. Being responsible,
Efficient with your output, not taking chances, not doing anything stupid.
that's the story. My recollection of all the rounds that Hitchins won from the middle to the end. Nothing spectacular happened. Nothing so dynamic that's going to leave you on the edge of your seat, because that's not what pure boxers do. They just work to disarm you.
Neutralizing your offense and periodically getting in with 1 or 2 clean punches at a steady pace. That's the pure boxer's fight. That's how it looks. Whether it's Hitchins, Sky Nicholson, or Shakur Stevenson, that's how it goes. That's how it went.
And so Hitchins is now the newly crowned IBF champion. You guys know how I feel about pure boxers and that base style. It's not my cup of tea, but was he effective with it? Yes. And was Liam Paro a credible scalp for him? Was he a good fighter?
He is.
Acknowledging that Hitchins didn't keep the energy for Subriel Matias when he was champion, that he kept for Liam Paro once he won the belt. He knew what he was doing. He knew that stylistically, a fight with Liam is a more winnable fight than a fight with Subriel would have been afterwards. I heard Hitchins call out Teofimo Lopez.
He's WBO champion at this weight. A fight between them would be a unification match. How would Hitchins fare against Teofimo? Frankly, I think that's a bad matchup for Teofimo.
In all the ways that Sandor Martin was a bad matchup for Teofimo, Jermaine Ortiz was a bad matchup for Teofimo, this would be worse. Understand that Liam is actually a bit better on the front foot than Teofimo is. I don't think Liam is a better counterpuncher than Teofimo, but I do think he's a bit better at coming forward. And if he wasn't able to have it all his way with Richardson Hitchins, I don't think Teofimo would either.
Not even with the help of Eddie Reynoso.
Listen, I think Eddie's great, and that's all well and good, but Eddie's not a miracle worker. He doesn't have the same success with every fighter that he trains that he has had with Canelo. Oscar Valdez, who also fought yesterday, that's a perfect example.
Look at what happened to him.
So when I think about this recent partnership with him and Teofimo, can he make him better? Sure, he can try, but I don't trust Teofimo to win a fight against this kind of fighter. I do not. Perhaps the saving grace is that it won't happen anyway.
Teofimo doesn't seem to have any intention of unifying the super lightweight division or staying there. He's got a couple of targets that he mentioned yesterday on the Top Rank broadcast, all of which fight above 140. He's not going to fight Richardson Hitchins.
If he were to, it would be an even more difficult fight than the Sandor Martin fight was. Sandor Martin is a pure boxer like Richardson Hitchins is a pure boxer, but Sandor Martin is actually a lot shorter, with shorter arms. The height, the length, in tandem with Richardson Hitchins' base style and economic approach, he could give Teofimo a lot of problems, though he won't get the chance.
It's not gonna happen.
And I question if any unification matches are for Richardson Hitchins now that he has the red belt. The other titles are on other sides of the street. Teofimo, he's got the brown belt, at least momentarily. Alberto Puello of the Dominican Republic, he's got the green and gold.
PBC guy.
Rayo Valenzuela, he's got the black and gold.
PBC guy.
This was a credible scalp for Richardson Hitchins, the best of his career so far, though moving forward, I question whether or not Matchroom can get him a big fight, get him a unification match, given the political landscape at 140 pounds, so congratulations to him.
This was a big success for him, and it was a success for Matchroom because they're the ones who got him to the title.
You often hear Oscar De La Hoya try to talk about Matchroom's failures, but this was a success. Here you have a fighter that came over from Mayweather Promotions over to Matchroom, and they groomed him into a champion. They put him on that path.
Tell the whole story, why don't you?
As far as Liam Paro and where he goes from here, it's hardly the end of the world that he lost his first professional boxing match, and I feel like you can still salvage that George Cambodia fight, that all-Aussie showdown. You can still do that. If you can sign George off a knockout loss to Vasyl Lomachenko,
you can put Liam in the ring with him in Australia. You didn't need a belt to sell it anyway.
The Aussie market, the Aussie boxing scene is an insulated boxing scene, insulated in a good way. Think about Anthony Mundine and Danny Green's two fights they had with each other. Those were big fights in Australia, even if they weren't for alphabet titles.
So you can still do this one. It's just unfortunate that Liam Paro put in the kind of work that he did, and he never got that big homecoming fight as a champion. I feel like this fight should have happened in Australia. It didn't, and we can't change the past. So it just is what it is, but it's not over for Liam.
Congratulations to Richard. Now, even though Matchroom crowned a new champion within their stable, one of the guys they were developing, the Boo Birds and critics happened to notice that two of their unbeaten up-and-comers, Mark Castro and Jaleel Hackett, suffered their first professional losses, and of course, they had something to say about it. Boxing insider Rick Glacier said, "History keeps repeating itself. Two of Eddie Hearn's undefeated prospects, Hackett and Castro, are no longer undefeated.
Are they supposed to be?
As both lost in Puerto Rico on the Matchroom show via DAZN, this is what happens when you don't have real boxing guys in your organization.
No, this is what happens when you have self-important parasites commenting on how you do your job.
For a perspective, Gabe Flores, a fighter that Top Rank was heavily invested in, he got beat on a Top Rank show by Luis Lopez.
He lost his O.
Giovanni Santillan lost his O to Brian Norman on a Top Rank show. And when he did, do you think that Rick Glacier was anywhere near as critical of the matchmaking at Top Rank as he is of the matchmaking at Matchroom? No, because he's a hypocrite.
When Blair Cobbs lost his O to Alexis Rocha on a Golden Boy show, even though Golden Boy promotes them both, do you think Rick Glacier was critical about that?
Of course not. What happened to Jaleel Hackett and Mark Castro yesterday has happened to other fighters that are with other promoters. But if it seems like a more regular occurrence on Matchroom, it's because Matchroom doesn't protect their fighters.
So what is it that you're advocating for, Rick? Softer matchmaking? Because it would be the Americans advocating for softer matches and padded records.
Eddie Hearn caught wind of these criticisms, these critics, and came out with a seething response.
A couple of DMs, like actually round from there's a guy called Junior Union, who's like 22-0, never boxed anyone in his life, right? Going, oh, Eddie Hearn gets a prospect beat. If you can't beat those guys, you're not the fighter that I thought you are. And if you lose tonight, it's not the end of the road for you. You've got to rebuild and you've got to come back better. Like, if you don't want to watch competitive fights, if you don't want to see prospects tested just a little bit when they're 8-1 on, don't watch my shows, because I'm going to give you real fights and I'm going to give you entertainment. And guess what? Sometimes when people underperform or they're not good enough, they're going to lose. Not every prospect is going to go on and be a world champion. But if you spoon feed them and never put them in anything competitive, one, it's a shit product. Two, it's a con for the fans. And three, you're not doing the right job for the fighter, because when they get to the top, they're not going to be good enough. Do you know what I'm saying?
Former unified junior middleweight champion Julian J-Rock Williams was among Eddie Hearn's critics yesterday, saying, no bullshit, Matchroom needs to fire their matchmaker ASAP. That's 3 blue-chip prospects in the last 2 cards. To which Eddie Hearn responded, bad attitude. If you lose fights, you should be winning. It just means you aren't or weren't good enough. It's called sport, and you can come again.
What did Julian Williams think of the matchmaking when they put him in there with Jermel Charlo, who he was so clearly not ready for?
What did he think of the PBC's matchmaking when they put him in there with Jason Rosario, who quite unexpectedly knocked him out?
What did he think? Or what about the Carlos Adames fight?
He lost that one too, so what did he think of the PBC's matchmaking then?
That he's now criticizing Eddie's.
J-Rock, whatever his name is, or what is it? Yeah, Julian Williams. Same thing. Oh, bad night for Eddie Hearn. He got 2 prospects. Not really. Eddie Hearn found out that tonight they ain't good enough. Oh, that's a bit harsh. Mate, you want me to keep it real with you? Mark Castro, you were not good enough tonight. If you perform like that, you are not going to be a world champion or reach that level. Jalil Hackett, if you don't make weight professionally, you are not going to beat guys like that who you should be strolling through. Facts. Grow a f***ing set and stop fucking mincing round the subject and be real with people. Sport. You get beat when you're not good enough. You know what I'm saying? You don't just make matchups that are shit where you can't lose. It's shit. It's shit for the sport. It's shit for the prospect.
Got a new world champion tonight.
Exactly. Richard,
Talk about that.
You know, people will say, oh, Mark Castro got, what about Richardson Hitchins?
Yeah.
Who we took,
Story.
was out on the street after Mayweather Promotions wouldn't give him a fight. And I took him, and I built him, I got him to headline, got him to a mandatory position, and he became world champion. You want to say our Matchroom brought him through to do that? No, you don't, because you want to criticise.
Former champion Raymond Ford responded to Julian Williams' critique, saying, no, they're teaching them how to be real steppers and not that padded shit.
What Rick Glacier and Julian Williams and so many American critics are advocating for is softer matchmaking. Soft, because that's helped the American boxing scene? Boxing that has faded into the background of the American sporting consciousness. Has that really helped your philosophy?
Now, what happened to Jaleel Hackett, Mark Castro, isn't anything that hasn't happened on any other show with any other unbeaten prospect. You just want to act like it's different when it happens to a Matchroom fighter.
Because it isn't supposed to happen?
Because he's supposed to match the fighter baby soft. So when they get in front of a live one, they're like a deer in the headlights. Would that be better? It doesn't lend itself to the illusion. The way that Matchroom matches their fighters. They're not trying to keep you unbeaten. They're trying to find out if you're the best. You're the one that has to prove it. Whereas what a lot of these American promoters and American proponents are advocating for is softer matchmaking that makes for a more long-lasting illusion. A con job, really. They're trying to con the boxing community into thinking that some fighters are better than what they actually are. So to do that, they match them soft, like what you see with Javante. But has this ideology actually helped the American boxing scene grow? This philosophy?
No.
This philosophy that has spawned many a risk-averse fighter, guy who's more businessman than boxer. We got no shortage of those in America. Has that really helped?
No.
See, what the Americans want to do is maintain this illusion that every unbeaten up-and-comer coming through is suddenly God's gift to boxing. That's why so many people overestimated Jaron Ennis's abilities.
It's a regular occurrence here to overestimate an unbeaten fighter's abilities before they've actually done anything.
And that's because of the con job, matching a guy baby soft so he looks better than what he actually is. I like the sink or swim ideology. You gotta filter out the dead weight, the guys who can make it, and separate them from the guys who can't.
Survival of the fittest.
And that's not what guys like Rick Glacier are all about, though he tried to clean it up saying, matchmaking, if you're attempting to build prospects, is about feel, timing, styles, and experience. Without that guideline, you aren't giving your young prospects a chance to develop, and that's a cardinal sin. Eddie Hearn, the fights you're talking about are supposed to be at contender level. Then you put them in.
The way these guys talk, you would think they're the ones running what is literally the most valuable boxing promotion in all of boxing.
You know, because Matchroom's worth was valued at more than Top Ranks, more than Golden Boys, and more than the PBCs that Eddie Hearn needs to take your advice because of how well things are going in the American boxing scene, I gather.
You're part of the problem.
You got it in your head that an unbeaten up-and-comer, a prospect trying to get to contender status, is never supposed to lose. This illusion that is more prevalent in the American boxing scene than any other because every unbeaten American thinks he's God's gift to boxing.
A byproduct of the matchmaking and the false sense of security it gives them.
Do you notice that some fighters, whether they're Mexican fighters or British fighters or Russian fighters, can lose a fight and then come again? Rebound, the way that Emmanuel Navarrete did this weekend. Putting distance between himself and that loss to Ivan Baranchyk at 135 and assuming control at 130. Dominating Oscar Valdez yet again. How come he can rebound off a loss but a Deontay Wilder can't?
The illusion and the false sense of security that once reality hits, your entire world and perception of self is turned upside down.
Wilder was never the same. After the loss to Tyson Fury, Keith Thurman was never the same. After the loss to Manny Pacquiao, Errol still hasn't rebounded off the loss to Terence Crawford over a year later. It's actually closer to 2, or it will be by the time he comes back.
Why?
Americans, more than many others, have a penchant for soft matchmaking, which isn't conducive towards producing the best shows and the fights that stimulate the audience and the boxing economy that capture the imagination. America's penchant for protecting their fighters.
Padded records.
You know what would seem like wisdom from boxing insider Rick Glacier. Oh, you're an insider in the American boxing scene, and how is that scene doing? How has it been doing? If you're a professional boxer, there's a high probability that at some point you're gonna lose, and that's a reality that you not only have to accept, but you have to deal with and be able to come back from.
Losses are gonna happen, and when they do, it's not supposed to be the end of the world, because all of you ain't Floyd Mayweather.
If you go through your career thinking that's what you are, well, when you lose, you're never gonna be the same.
And soft matchmaking doesn't help anyone.